can hear you. Okay.
There we go.
There we go. All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. So it is the top of the hour, and if you've been on a call previously, you know that I like to start on time. So good afternoon, everyone from the East Coast, and welcome to MVP Office Hours. If you don't recognize my voice, this is Jackie Travieso. Dale and Jared are both enjoying some well-deserved PTO time. And so that I wasn't flying solo, we're going to do something a little differently today. We are joined by special guest facilitator, Peter Lyons. You've heard his voice many times on our calls addressing automation, flows, Einstein analytics, and a plethora of other topics. And he's going to facilitate while I take notes and document the resources that everyone shares. And with that, Peter, we are so grateful to have that you accepted our invitation and to co-facilitate. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. So go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Glad to be here and really looking forward to the opportunity to help out. So this is MVP Office Hours, and if you've never been to one of these before, first we start by talking about some of the upcoming events that we have. So, coming up next, we've got NorCal Dreamin' next week, but you can see on the slide here, we've got a big long list of all of the different community events that are up and coming. Now on this next slide here, we just have some information about basically the format and the process. So although this is called MVP Office Hours, don't feel that you need to be an MVP to be able to contribute. This is by the community, for the community. Everyone can participate. So if you have a good answer to the question, or if you have a good question to ask, feel free to raise your hand in chat. And no question is too small. Don't be shy. Don't hesitate. Raise your hand and ask a question, and we'll all try to help out. So when we do unmute you, please introduce yourself. Let us know what the issue is, and if needed, you can actually share your screen. But please be mindful that this is going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So do not share any confidential data out of your production environment. It's very, very important. Please keep your data safe. But we will also, post resources in chat, and we will add them to the deck, and that will be available as well. So MVP Office Hours is not only this call. I'm one slide ahead. So if there's any MVPs out there, please raise your hands, and so we can say hi. I know I recognize a few of the names on this list. Do we got any other MVPs? I see Carlos is on. All right.
Got Carlos and Igor, and I think those are the names that I recognize. If you guys want to, in the chat, go ahead and maybe take a moment to cite what areas of Salesforce you love to use and are experts in. That way, if somebody has a question about those areas, they know that they've got somebody on the line that can help them out. Not seeing anything come in chat, so maybe they don't have that open. All right, take it away, Pete.
So in addition to these office hours that are in the US, there's also one in for Europe, or I can't actually pronounce, EMEA. We also have Portuguese office hours, which is hosted by Carlos. And don't be shy. It is not, you don't need to speak Portuguese to be able to participate in that one. Carlos does an excellent job of facilitating and translating. So it is very much like this call, open to all participants. So the US call is on the 1st and 3rd Fridays of the month. EMEA is on the last Thursday of the month, as well as Portuguese. One thing to call out is that there will be a buy for the next call for this due to the holiday weekend here in the US. So the next call will not be on the 7th. I believe the next one after that is the 19th. All right, so I see that we've already got some hands raised. Marty, I believe you were first. So why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what we can help with.
Hi, this is Marty. So I think this is an easy question or not. I'm working with the customer, setting up forecasts. So based on everything it says, where the one cumulative forecasts are going away, I've set it up as collaborative forecasts. And I see the screen under forecasts and it looks correct, but the client wants a report that in essence mimics the forecast screen, in other words, by hierarchy. And in a call with Premier Support this morning, they confirmed, because sometimes I just shake my head that you can't do something when I search for it. They confirmed there, in essence, is no such report. And so my question is, if I set up territory hierarchies, is there any way to get a forecast report in hierarchical, that's the right word, hierarchical looks? In other words, mimic the forecast screen where the VP of sales can see the forecast for east, west, and then the people under them.
All right, great question. So does anybody have any thoughts on that? If you feel that you have the answer, you don't need to be an MVP. Feel free to just unmute yourself, or if you can't do that, post in the chat and I can unmute you. So does anybody have anything to contribute for this?
So I don't have an exact answer, but I can tell you how we solved the business case here.
Great.
Is that we leverage dynamic dashboards. So create the forecast reports, based on the probability, the opportunity, and select the My Team's opportunities, I think is what it's called. And then putting those onto a dynamic dashboard. So like our director of sales can see, or like director of North America can see everything, and then each team manager underneath her can just see the view that applies to their team. And we use that for more than just forecasting, but forecasting is definitely included in there. But pipeline and sales activity, we've got all those on the dynamic dashboards. But that's kind of an indirect, not an exact answer to your question for replacing the forecast view.
Okay, thank you.
What is it about territories? I'm trying to find something here. My screen's not cooperating. Something about when you turn them on, you cannot turn them off. So you
right. That's why I haven't done it.
If it were me, I would dive into also what are the implications. I mean, I have not worked with territories, but if you have to sort of back out of it, is there a workaround, or can you sweet talk Salesforce into turning it off?
Yeah, I was going to do it in a dev org, create one and try it, because I don't know that that's going to solve the problem. And maybe I can convince them that just looking on the screen is good enough, because this is one of those times that it does kind of shock me that you can't get a report in hierarchical format. Some people still like reports.
Do they understand that with the forecasting they can do manager manipulation, and that it's dynamic right then and there?
Well, it's a brand new VP, so and we're just implementing. So the answer is no. They don't really understand much of anything at this moment. So that's the answer to that question.
And I think that I would press the difference between a report, you can look at it, but you can't do anything with it.
Right,
but
exactly.
You actually log in, you can manipulate and affect the numbers the way you need to immediately, and still keep the history for the individual salesperson.
Right.
How many tiers of your hierarchy do you have?
So there's a senior VP, there's middle managers, and then there's salespeople. So it's only three.
One thing you might be able to consider is creating a custom report type for opportunities, and pulling in through, I'm trying to think, I'm not 100% sure if I've actually done this. I think I did once, but pulling in the owner role and the owner role's manager, and then I think might be the condition of this is since you've got 3 levels is if you can pull manager's manager in through lookup fields on a report type, then you could group them and essentially end up with the subtotals.
I'm gonna
showing your
try
different
that. Yeah,
sections.
I've been playing with custom report types and I've been trying to find the right object. So I'll try that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you should be able to traverse that many layers of a lookup. I think you can go up like 4 or 5 layers in the custom report type.
You can. I'm not as sure about looking up manager's manager from the owner. Have you done that before? I know you can do manager's role, but I've
I
not
haven't,
done
but it's-
manager's role. It seems like you should be able to.
You should be able to. It should be easy enough to task to.
Okay, I'll try that. Thank you, everybody.
And Pete dropped a link into chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, great. Great. Pete, before we go to the next question, are you on the first resources slide or the second? Okay. All right, well, I'm taking notes and dropping it in there, but it's not registering on that slide. Okay, that's fine. We'll share this one out when we're done anyway. So, okay.
All right, so who's next? I saw 3 hands up, but I don't know which one was first, so I guess we should probably go in the order in the chat panel. So I think that would put Scott next.
Okay, that's good because I think I was second anyways. You guys hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Actually, I'm thrilled that Pete showed up today because my questions are about process automation. I'll give my general problem is that my org is slow. I'm kind of inheriting this issue. I have like on one object, for instance, I have like 60 process builders and like a couple dozen workflows. So ETLing into different objects, for instance, like I've got Heroku set up and I've got ETL systems set up. And if I take an object that doesn't have any workflows on it, I can insert or I can update 5,000 rows in like under a minute. And if I go to try to do the same thing on the objects with all the process builders and the workflows, it'll take like 15 minutes. And I have to actually no, it takes more like 30 minutes. And then my actual population is a little bigger than that. So to update like 7,000 records, it ends up taking 40 minutes, which really should take, at first I thought maybe Salesforce was just slow, but I've been able to get Heroku to update pretty fast. So I think Salesforce should be able to do those records in like 1 or 2 minutes. You were talking about debugging tools and stuff. So I'm trying to get a handle of all these process builders that we have. And I was pretty disappointed to learn that like there's no metadata out there. Like I opened up a case, like I can't know if a process builder has run, right? Like that's kind of bizarre from my perspective. In addition, like how do I get runtime for these process builders or these workflows? How do I know about what is the slowest one running, etc.? Is the way people deal with this by creating their own logging objects, and then like in your in your process builder, the first thing you do is write to some custom object with like a job ID and start time, etc. Like what sort of design patterns are you guys using to handle this and deal with, you know, lots of process builders running? And then the architecture that I'm looking to move to, that I'd like to kind of maybe validate, is I'm looking to serialize it so that I make the rule that we only have one process builder fire off for an object. And then that process builder calls different process builders, etc., so that it gets at least serialized so that these process builders aren't like running against each other and creating contention. So that's my spiel.
How many process builders did you say you had?
I think on this one object we have like 60, so on some other objects like maybe 20 or so.
And just for my own information and for the people on the line too, are your processes created by objects, or are all of your lead processes under one object, or under one process that's just leads, or do you have multiple processes, one for each what am I trying to say? So
They're spawning off in parallel. So like
okay.
they're not. That's one of my ideas. One of my ideas is to say, well, we're only going to assign one process builder to an object, and then that guy's going to spawn off the other guys. Right now, what happens is for contact, I think contact has like 20, and they're all just assigned to it. And not a lot of them are doing particularly hard things. So some of them are doing hard things, but it's hard to identify. It's hard to identify what the problems are.
So I can try to take this a little bit in a different direction and say, well, first of all, it's a little bit excessive number of process builders for a single object to begin with as architecture.
Yes,
but
obviously.
I would say in your system, I would expect you really have to watch the order of execution. Your Apex transactions or DML transactions will be very risky with that type of setup. And you're better off looking at it and kind of taking it and re-architecting the business process or processing of this information and consolidating that into some type of a different type. You know, my guess is it's probably doing very minute operations, but different people did it at a different time, and that's why they didn't know what the other process builders did, and they added that new process builder to not to conflict with anything else. So it's probably overall look at what you're trying to do as far as transactions go to rectify this problem, because with that amount of process builders, it's very, very hard for you would be to understand what actually depends on what and what are the risk factors with your data that you're going to encounter in there. Not to mention, you probably have Apex triggers running on that too. So order of execution is a very risky thing there, and governance limits would be a severe problem.
Yeah, but how do I get there? So yeah, I agree, right? Like that's where I'm trying to get to. But how do I how long does the process builder run?
To answer your question in terms of finding out what the process builder's runtime is, so logging, as you have mentioned, probably won't be a solution to go to, simply because, as you may know, if any of the process builders in the chain of events fail, then your log operation will also be rolled back with everything else. So you're not going to get any logs in case of an error. So I would propose, if you're trying to go that route to kind of identify the bottlenecks, so to speak, you may be able to leverage internal platform events. And instead of logging directly into the database, fire off a platform event from inside the process builder at the beginning and at the end of the chain. And then you have another method that will catch those events and actually log it as a separate transaction. So at least you catch the log consistently across the board, whether there are errors or not errors.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of the platform event. We don't have any. I don't think we actually have issues with things failing. So the writes to the database would go through most likely. But I think that I like the idea of using the platform event and then catching those later on. Now, on that aspect, I probably should leverage platform events for just other stuff, for maybe triggering other process builders.
You could do that. However, that's something to do with if you can move your processing of data into asynchronous mode, then platform event would be a good solution. But not every solution can be done that way. So that's something to look at the business process and whether you can or cannot do it asynchronously, because that will be essentially the advantage of platform event is you starting a new transaction, it will be asynchronous transaction, and you govern the limits, and therefore it's very safe to just write it down.
Okay. A related question. So one of the refactoring aspects is like a lot of our work doesn't need to be done then, as you're alluding to. But in addition, like it would be better done in like a nightly batch. But now there's the case of identifying and logging those events, right? Like it's kind of easy to do in the process builder, the trigger, because at that point in time, you have the old state and the new state. So you're like, oh, the state changed, go do this thing. So what I'd like a generic, a somewhat generic, like record of all these things that need to be then done later on at night during the batch. So for instance, like a lot of these things are trivial. It's like the client has changed their option comfortability rating to being from like beginner to expert. So now we have to send them out like an email talking about how they can trade options. And that doesn't have to happen like right now. That happens like when that's changed. And it doesn't have to happen when that changes. And in addition, I wonder whether it's actually waiting on the email to be sent. I don't know how you guys do that stuff. But like in that case, we've got a lot of these little cases, right? And what I'd like some sort of system for like not exactly replaying those changes, but like not having to customize, like make a custom like rule for every one of these things and like storing the state change, right? Like I could say, okay, I'm going to create an object that stores all these changes, and it's going to have like that this particular account has changed this value to this value, and now I need to do like the operation on it, right? Later on and look up that account and send out the email, right? But then like I have all the other different cases, and I just see it being very messy. Is there like a way of like having like a deferred event or replaying those events or something in the future?
Well, it's not a replaying event, but I think what you're describing sounds very much like either transactional log, or in a world of Salesforce, it's something called change data capture that you can leverage now. Any changes that occur, you can filter and listen. You can listen to those changes and filter to what you're interested in knowing. So you can turn on the data capture for specific objects you want to know about, and then set up listeners either outside of Salesforce or inside Salesforce for these changes, and then know what to do with it. You can act accordingly. If you need to send an emails, then based on the certain change, you could do that. And that is something coming out of the box with the system that you don't have to build anything special for it. Every change will be fired off into the event. And it's basically a similar process like a platform event, but it's going to be a special event that it's called change data capture event.
Yeah, it's actually, it's cool. As like a computer programmer, like I think it's very cool, but it's not, it takes a lot of programming. For instance, like change data capture does not guarantee like order of receiving packages, for instance. So you need to have like a server with state that is collecting these messages and then waiting, because it's like, it's got an order column, and it sounds cool, but like I think the implementation of that is a little on the difficult side, because you can't just get the messages and process them as you're going, and then it does have a replay, but I don't recall the replay being like super long. So like ideally, I would like to like replay these things later, like start subscribing and then replay.
Well, the replay is something that is for failures, particularly with change data capture with platform event in general. Replay is for failures. If the event was successful, it will live in a system for 24 hours. After that, it will be discarded. So that's one of those aspects of the cloud shared system, like multi-tenancy, like Salesforce.
Or just your guy didn't receive a message, so you make a request to get a replay, like with like multicast systems and different systems. Like I'm receiving these messages, and I see that I haven't gotten.
There is no guaranteed delivery. It's not TIBCO. It is not webMethods or other kind of brokers that can do guaranteed delivery and replay.
Exactly. That's my point. That's why replay exists. So I'm receiving these messages, and I see I haven't gotten all the messages. So I then make a request, say, hey, give me back the messages so I can reprocess them.
I mean, I have a few thoughts that might be able to help. First of all, it's not the most foolproof, but process builders and flows do show up in debug logs. You can't create like system.debug in them. So it's a little hard. You have to sift through the whole bulk, but that will tell you to the millisecond timestamps of when a different operation did or didn't fire. The solution to the overall problem is actually relatively simple. The main problem that you have is the bulk. You do need to definitely get down to a state where you have one process builder per object that can trigger either other process builders, or if you really want to ensure that things are happening in the correct order, you can refactor everything into flows, or Apex for that matter. You know, I'm a declarative guy. I go with flows myself, but if I've got, you know, 15 different processes firing on one object, I'll try to see how many of them I can consolidate into one reasonably. And a feature that we got in the last few releases that does definitely help with that is that we can say now in our process builder that even if a criteria is met, I still want you to go to the next action, which is a lot of the cause for why you'll see a lot of this is because we didn't already have that. So if we had multiple criteria and we wanted both of those actions to take place, if both sets of criteria were met, people would end up creating multiple process builders. You don't know which order they're going to fire in. They could potentially ping pong off each other and create loops. So another thing to look for is, do you even know if all of these processes are still even necessary? So I would kind of projectize it, and I would go through one object at a time. I would document every process that's firing, identify everything that's actually being changed on the record. First, understand, does it need to be done? And if it doesn't, you know, check with the business, make sure that it's good to turn it off, turn that one off. Then try to see how many of these have overlapping functionality and can be consolidated down together. Unfortunately, we can't just copy and paste and merge process builders. So it's definitely a tedious manual effort. With flows, there are some tricks where you can basically, you can put them in a change sets, download the package XML, manually modify that, and kind of manhandle flows into each other. It's not the best idea, but it is technically possible.
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
So on a process builder, can I change what it triggers off of though?
Not the object.
Oh my God. Really? Like I can't just say now you're not going to fire off this object, you're going to fire off of something else?
That's correct. Even if you clone it, once it's been created, you can't change it, which is...
I was assuming I could just create a process builder and then start just like popping these guys into, I wasn't planning on like doing super analysis on each one, right? I was planning on saying, okay, I'm going to create a new process builder. I'm going to take this guy, stick him in here, have the logging surround him, right? Take the next guy, stick him in. I had to like recreate each one of these.
So processes, when you create them initially, you can choose if it's fired when a record changes or when it's invoked by another process. I don't believe you can change that by cloning it. And unfortunately, I do think this is going to be a manual effort. Again, theoretically, you could use like Ant or Capado or something like that to potentially pull out the metadata. I don't know what it's going to look like, but you could theoretically try to, you know, manipulate it in a text editor and try to compile things that way. It's definitely not officially supported, but it is potentially possible. In my experience, we always end up having to do it manually. And
so
that is
does it come back through? Because I didn't think I saw process builders.
No, process builders do come back. It's exactly the same as the flow, because ultimately under the covers, process builder is a flow, and you get a flow XML for each process builder. But I would not recommend to mess around with these flow XMLs, simply because as soon as you misplace one of the commas somewhere, it effectively defuncts your process builder. Even when you deploy it, you won't be able to run it or start it. It's pretty funky how the XML gets messed up in deployment process through source control even. So I would not recommend the manual updates to that.
I have dev environments up the butt, so I can just mess around with them if I.
But you can definitely look at the XML and see what it looks like for process builders, because it's ultimately going to be flow interview execution, similar what the flows do.
Yeah.
So it will be visible, in other words.
Okay, that's good news. And another stupid question. Sorry. If I call a process builder from a process builder, do I have the option of having it run async or synchronous?
I don't believe that's something that you can declare.
No, you cannot run it like that, but you can.
Does it run synchronous or
Again,
asynchronous then? What's the
it will be always synchronous because the process builders, if they operate off of DML operations, it will be part of the Apex transaction, and by default, it will be a synchronous transaction. However, if your process builder is built that it fires off an event, that event may start off another process builder. That will be an asynchronous situation. If your process builder calls an Apex class that then fires off a future method, that then does a DML operation that fires off a different process builder, that's again asynchronous scenario.
Okay. So if I want to do asynchronous, I just simply make a platform event that then triggers a process builder. If I actually want to.
If you wanted to architect it that way, you can do it. But one thing I wanted to say is that typically process builders themselves are very skinny, thin runtimes. They're not really heavy, intensive operations. They could be string on along. You have a lot of conditions in there, a lot of operations and whatnot. But by itself and large, it's not very intensive. What I would could be concerned about if you do run into problems, one of them is just because sheer number of these triggers, because each one of these process builders requires under the covers in the framework to build a trigger for this to actually run this thing and fire it off. So if you just have too many of them, that might be what taking the time. And the second part, I would really question what are these process builder operations doing, because most likely they may be making some type of calls or some type of operations that's actually do take most of the time. And it's not the process builder itself is the problem. It's what that thing is calling is the problem. And it might be calling some kind of transaction or maybe doing some kind of a call out that's then waiting, and that service might be not returning in time. So that I would investigate that first before I would go ahead and kind of defunct all the process builders, especially if you have like 50 or 60 of them. I would definitely look through and see if you could spot anywhere the process builders might be triggering a call outs and then have to wait for it. Anytime you call an Apex classes that might be doing something funky or some other very heavy intensive operations that cause a lot of DMLs that basically calling your spend of time, because it's by itself. If you just string along a very large process builder, it would be really quick to run through, because all it is just like a finite automation machine that just invokes other things.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll cede the floor to the other people with questions. Again, thanks a lot for your feedback and help.
All right, great discussion we got going on. So I'm not sure if Christy or Jade had their hand up first, but we're just going to go in order of chat. Christy, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your question is?
Thank you. I've never been on this call before. This is a great thing. I finally get to make it. Yay. I have some mini weird questions. I'm with a company that has a few divisions, and 2 divisions have Salesforce now. And there's an IT person with the corporate part who is concerned that the 2 instances are connected somehow. Besides giving him the URL and the org ID, how else can I convince this guy in IT that they're not connected?
That is a very interesting question. Did you confirm that there is no Salesforce to Salesforce functionality between the 2?
Yes, they were set up on separate contracts a year and a half apart. And even I know Troy Stair, the salesperson, but it's 2 completely separate instances. It's just that we all use the same Microsoft Office email stuff. And so I think this IT person that I have to talk to Monday, he's still concerned. I'm like, I gave you the URL. Like, I don't know what else you want.
What is the reason for raising that concern? What's his motivation to raise that concern that two Salesforce orgs are connected to each other in some shape?
The other instance has single sign-on, and we have 2-factor authentication, and we don't have that turned on. And he was saying when they turn that on, that it caused some issue with ours. And here's what I actually think now, because Inbox wasn't working for some of my reps when they were in the middle of doing all this Microsoft security stuff. But I think that was now user error, that I had to not only assign the license, but I also had to do the permission for Inbox. So I think the timing was just coincidental on that.
I mean, you could go to company information and take a screenshot of the unique org IDs. You know, send them some docs on multi-tenancy.
Well, it sounds to me like this IT person raising the concern because some functionality was somehow affected in one org when the other org did something. Am I reading that correctly?
It was actually, he believed that functionality was affected because at the same time they were clamping down. There was someone who clicked on some phishing email. So then they took the entire company email and just clamped that down, and they were setting up the other org of Salesforce at the time. But I said, hey, my inbox is not working for my reps now. And I believe now that was coincidental, but that has put in his head that it was connected. And it's not. I know it's not. So I just was wondering if there was any other magic besides the org ID and the URL. So
in the URL, I would just call out that if the pods are different, so you know, NA14, NA62, that's how you know that the pods are different as well.
Oh, okay, I'll add that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I would do if I were in your shoes is I would go straight to Salesforce and go, I need some kind of documentation from you that just says, hey, Salesforce is saying these two orgs are not connected.
So pods and all that auxiliary information is useful to understand that they live in a different environment. But I would look at the SSO configuration in both orgs and see if make sure that neither one of those orgs acts as an IDP for another org. And there is no other users that are being shared among orgs, because frequently you could set up two orgs where one would be an IDP and the other will be a service provider. And therefore you can connect those two orgs. And I mean, now users from one org can traverse data in another org seamlessly without logging in. But that requires a setup on SSO, and so you're basically connecting two orgs together in a way, but not directly. It's more like a user browser that connects them now.
Oh, well, that's really great information. We don't have, in our instance, we don't have SSO set up, but they want to. And I found out that's delegated or federated, not delegated. I've been reading up on this so I can understand the whole thing, because Slalom set up our instance 2 years ago. And then now knowing what you just said, that's very helpful, because they want us to turn that on, and I'll make sure, hey, let's just keep the tokens separate.
Well, if you already have a delegated authentication set up or delegated, that is
no, we don't.
Essentially a delegated. Oh, you don't, because you said you did have.
No, they have federated SSO in the other instance, and my instance that I run has nothing but two-factor authentication.
Oh, okay, I see. So you're going directly to loginsalesforce.com and they go to IDP. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
Igor, tell us what IDP stands for, please.
IDP stands for Identity Provider.
Identity Provider, thank you.
Yeah, and SP stands for Service Provider, and they work together.
Thank you.
Cool stuff. So I believe Jade would be next.
Hi, I had a question about enabling Einstein stories. So I read from the help that you have to have Einstein discovery turned on. So it is enabled, but I just don't see the Einstein story option when you go to data set. You're supposed to have that option there, and I don't know if I'm missing something else.
Do you have Analytics Plus or the legacy licenses where Analytics and Discovery were separate?
We have the Plus license, but I do see that I have two different apps, the Discovery app and the Analytics Studio app.
That's strange, because they integrated the two apps in Winter 19, and that was supposed to be rolled out throughout the course of that release. They did a couple of different batches where they moved orgs from the old UI to the new UI. What I'm gonna suggest for you is because you very well may still have the old interface where you would just have a different tab for discovery and you wouldn't be able to create stories directly from Analytics Studio. I was under the impression that all orgs should have been moved over by now, especially if you're already on the Plus licenses. And they're actually going to be completely disabling that in the near future. So if you did create any stories in the old interface, those would all have to be recreated in the new interface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link in the chat for the Trailblazer community. And if you post to that, that group, I'll mention Francois Lapiteau, who's he kind of oversees the whole discovery thing. And, you know, you might need to create a ticket, but he would be able to log into your org and confirm if it got switched over or not, and look into that further for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Great. And while Peter is looking for that link to share with everyone, it looks like Scott has another question. Scott, go ahead.
So my next question is on Einstein, and I'm glad that you guys talked about that. And I'll briefly talk to reporting since somebody else talked about that, and maybe my reporting issues may have some help for them. I'm probably implementing a external reporting solution for Salesforce, using like basically Salesforce visualization, either Heroku or something of something else that provides like a CData data source, and then running reporting like out of Amazon. You know, one thing we're considering is Power BI, because it can provide those reports that kind of were spoken of before, that like your compliance department and various people want, the paginated reports that just print good. It has been brought up to me though that Einstein can do reporting, which surprised me because when I had followed the trailhead and done the various things on it, I really only see it doing like ML stuff and, you know, like ML Lite, like and telling about, you know, Twitter intention, etc., like that type of stuff. Does Einstein actually have like a good reporting engine under it that will let you do reasonably sophisticated paginated reports?
So this is kind of a branding problem. Salesforce is paying a lot for the right to use the Einstein label, and so they try to get a lot of mileage out of this. Are you familiar with the tool that used to be called Wave?
No.
Okay, so in 2014, Salesforce acquired EdgeSpring, and it was basically meant to be like not quite BI, more advanced analytics, and that product became Wave. And in 2017, it was rebranded as Einstein Analytics, while we at the same time started to see all of these, you know, AI and AI-like functionality, you know, machine learning, natural language processing, etc., all coming under that Einstein umbrella. Einstein Analytics is a advanced reporting solution that sits on top of Salesforce. It's very interactive. It's very collaborative. It's tied into Chatter. It's a really, in my opinion, it's a great product, especially if the majority of the data that you're going to be consuming is Salesforce data. It's very easy to drop dashboards into record detail pages, and with just a few clicks, you can filter them to the context of that record or pass different values from the record as filters. I'm a huge fanboy of the tech. I've got an entire YouTube channel with about 14 hours of content dedicated just to Einstein Analytics. So I'll post a link to some trails that will give you some better insights into what that is. But yeah, like a lot of the problems that you have with standard dashboards, for example, trying to create filters on a standard Salesforce dashboard, in Einstein Analytics, we just drag them on the page and they just work. So it's a really great product. There's also a lot of out-of-the-box offerings. For example, the Sales Analytics Suite has like 15 different dashboards focused around opportunity pipeline. And there's just a simple wizard that walks you through and says things like, what field do you segment by geography? What field do you use to distinguish between new customers and returning customers, stuff like that. And then it builds all of your data sets and your dashboards for you. There's a lot of nuance to it. It's pretty unique. It doesn't use a lot of the normal coding methods that regular Salesforce does. The UI is quite powerful. You can get pretty far without writing code.
Question. So
go ahead.
So So for instance, I evaluated Tableau, and like Tableau doesn't actually do what I want. So I'm not looking for a BI. BI is like a nice bonus. What I'm really looking for is kind of like what that lady in the beginning talked about. Like, I want a report I can print, that like old school, like Crystal Reports type stuff. Does it do that stuff? Not the interactive BI stuff, like I got this compliance report that they need to look this particular way because this is what the auditors get. And we actually don't want it to be changeable because that's not what compliance is about. Compliance is about getting the same thing printed every day, showing whatever exceptions are supposed to show up on the report, like those type of things.
You can generate tabular reports, and they don't work well with high volume data. So I would say, like, if you need more than 25 columns and 250,000 rows, it's not going to be a good option. But if you're looking at something smaller than that, yeah, you can generate just standard tabular reports. You can download them as CSV and distribute it that way. But there isn't really a good automatic scheduling mechanism at all. There's a print function, but that really all that does is just narrow the page and leverage the browser's print functionality. So if you need it scheduled, it might not be the right tool for you. But what we can do with tables is pretty cool.
Okay. Now, do you have? I mean, I'll have to test. This is enough to make it like worth the evaluation. But yeah, I mean, like the worries that I have is like, printing, like, some solutions when you go to print, like you try to go to print Tableau and you get like one of the lines gets like truncated at the bottom of the page, right? Like that type of stuff, or it doesn't really, fit it to the width of the screen. Now, when you said high volume, are you talking about the high volume of rows printed or the high volume of rows processed?
Printed. So if you try to download a table that's displaying like 250,000 rows, it's going to lag up on you pretty bad, but eventually you'll get it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, it really performs best because, again, it's meant to be a visualization engine. The ability to download things is kind of an afterthought, really. So I typically advise to my clients, don't go more than 50,000 rows because the browser will lag up for a minute. People will think it's broken, then they'll spam the button, and then Chrome will block multiple downloads, or your browser will lock up for a few minutes. My torture tests I've done is I once got it to give me 1 million rows with 2 columns. It took 7 minutes. I never got it to go further than that. I
definitely don't need that. I mean, what I need is it needs to look at like 2 million rows and then return me back the 500 rows that I care about, or the 500 rows grouped up, right? But I'm assuming Einstein does good at that because it's supposed to be like a different database. I can put like 1 billion rows in it or something like that, right?
Yep. If you want to actually reach out to me offline, and be happy to like set up like a 30-minute demo for you.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Let's Play Salesforce at Gmail.
Say that again. Your last name?
Oh no, my name's Pete Lyons, but
okay.
my email is just Let's Play Salesforce at gmail.com.
And I know when somebody else has their hand up, if I can ask another quick question, which is mainly just about career development. I just took the Dev 1 test and I passed it, and the suggestion of using Focus Force was very good. It helped me. But now I'm looking to do the architecture path. We'll probably do like integrations first. There doesn't really seem to be much. There's no trail. Like the thing is like basically just go read these articles, right? There's no like, doesn't seem like there's a trailhead associated with at least that architecture path. Does anybody have like suggestions for resources to pursue these paths? Okay. Thank you so much, guys. The next person.
Yeah, sorry, I've got nothing on that one. I'm not architect material just yet. Pat, I believe you got your hand up. What do you got for us?
Very specific question about Lightning Web Components. Is anybody working in those? If not, I'll not waste the time here.
If nobody else is going to say it, I mean, I've coded AngularJS and React, and I have played a little bit with Lightning components. So If
All
you
right.
tell me
Well,
which question
I mean,
might be.
I've been working in them for 3 or 4 months, so I'm really familiar with it. But one of the things suddenly is not working. I don't know if it's related to summer 19 or if they changed the code or what the deal is. But I've got a Lightning record edit form, and I'm calling up a field that's a date time field, and I want to pre-populate that with an API value that I'm pulling in from the component that called it. And for some reason, I cannot pre-populate the value of that start date time. And it was pre-populated before. It just stopped working. I don't know if anybody else has seen that or has an idea of what's going on.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Have you had a chance, Pat, to log a case?
No, I dropped a note to Greg Ruiz on Twitter, but I haven't logged a case yet.
Okay. The only reason I say log a case is because one of the partners that I've been working with when they rolled out the summer 19, it compromised some things in their orgs. I don't know what it was, or I just know that they said we had some issues when summer 19 just rolled out, and they were putting out some fires. But I don't know anything more than that. That's why I would suggest logging.
Yeah, I had some other things that happened when summer 19 came out. They changed the way they deal with tabs in Lightning Web Components. And so my tabs, suddenly my display broke. So I had to go in and change the class names on some things. So that was kind of an unexpected surprise.
Okay, so let's just have a little quick conversation about that, since you are a partner as well and you have a package out there. How are you pushing that out to your clients when there are changes like that?
Well, most of my clients were up to the current version, and so I could do it with a quick patch.
Okay.
No new component. I just went in and, well, actually, I actually just pulled the class out, and it reverted to displaying correctly.
Okay.
So for most of my clients, it was as simple as an overnight push the patch to them. There were a couple of clients that were 2 or 3 versions behind because they weren't using didn't need the features that had been added in the subsequent versions. So, with those, I just touched base with them and said, hey, let's let me log in and update you to the new version.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, I think that's all the hands raised. Anybody else have a question or they want to jump in spontaneously?
Is anybody else going to be at NorCal Dreamin'?
No, I'll be at Big Sky Dreamin'.
Cool.
In
That's
Montana.
Montana.
I'll be at Midwest Dreamin'.
I'm going to Northeast dreaming.
There we go. We're all dreaming.
I'm all over the country. That's awesome.
If I could do them all, I would do them all. But realistically, I can do 1 or 2.
Yeah, at NorCal Dreamin', I'm doing a 30-minute session on record ID. Basically, making your apps smarter to recognize record ID, and then showing some things in Apex you can do to customize your results. Basically, make your component smart so it knows where it is and knows what data to deliver.
Cool. Is this your first presentation, Dreamin' presentation?
No, I spoke at Force Academy. I did 45 minutes at Force Academy. I also did a 45-minute session at Cactus Force.
Okay. Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
I'll be at Witness Success and Midwest Dreamin'.
Oh, good. So you guys are in Nashville, I think, this year, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Have a great time. All right, any other questions? We've got about 6 minutes left. What's everybody's favorite new feature in summer 19? What should we be doing?
Quick one for the analytics piece. So previously, when I mentioned that we could put analytics dashboards directly into record detail pages and Lightning app pages and even Visualforce pages. Previously, though, you could do all of this stuff without code at all. But when you had to say, like, okay, and I want to pass the account ID into the dashboard to filter it, then we would have to write this kind of clunky JSON to do it. But now we do have a filter builder in the UI, and it's exactly like component visibility. We also finally got filter logic, which is a huge functional gap that they finally fixed. So filter 1 and or filter 2, that sort of stuff. So really cool features. Glad to see that.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I like the sales path confetti.
I was going to ask if anybody saw that and what they thought about it.
I like it.
Awesome. Have you gotten any feedback from your users?
No, we're not set to roll out until September.
Oh, okay. I feel like that's one of those things where you just kind of turn on in the background, not say anything, and then see the reaction.
I did, but it's funny. I found it works in the path, but we have dependencies to close out an opportunity. So kind of like, hey, why did we win it? And so it doesn't work if I do it in the details. It only works if I click it on the path. And I went, well, I don't know if my users are going to see it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I'm going to have to play around with that one.
I bet I know Pete's favorite new feature.
What's that?
In Flows, you can now clone a component or an element that you've created.
Yep. That is definitely something I'm glad to see it return. Unfortunately, it does not clone the lines.
I'm sorry, it doesn't clone the which?
The connections between them. So
yeah. Well,
if I clone out 4 nodes, I still have to reconnect them. We're getting closer to what we had before with that, and you know the good outweighs the bad on that one. So I'll be patient.
Can you group clone?
Well, you shift click.
Yeah, so you shift click multiple and clone them all at once? Didn't know that.
I think it's shift click or control click, but you can select multiple elements and then clone multiple elements, but it won't preserve the connection between those elements. But just having any clone functionality back is something I'm really happy about.
Yeah, I find the lines in the new flow builder frustrating. I end up moving things around so I can see the lines and the labels, and I wish things could align, but anyway.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that feel that way, and honestly, the best way to get your voice heard is honestly just log an idea to the Exchange if there isn't one already, and then post it to as many different groups that are concerned about automation as possible, because that's really, so Shannon Hale on the product team, she's, I've talked to her and she said, yeah, the lines is something that we wish wasn't the case, but she's got a lot of other things on her priority list. For example, they had to get us back the rich text editor, they had to get us clone. But having an idea out there and trying to get a lot of votes on it, that's a good way of letting the voice of the community be heard, and hopefully bubbling that up on the priority list a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we got 2 minutes left. We probably have time for one more question or thought. If not, we can certainly give you back 2 minutes in your day. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciation and thanks to Pete for being our guest facilitator today. Pete, I hope you enjoyed yourself. You did a wonderful job. It was great having you lead our call.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Catch you next time.
Great. And with that, everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you mid-July, the 3rd Friday of the month. Take care, everyone.
Bye.